Welcome back to Proxim, everybody, and today we're going to be doing a very quick video looking at Overwatch once again, and, really just seeing if it's actually that big of a deal. Now, I did initially make a video a couple days back covering the new Overwatch changes, and in that video I stated that Overwatch was something that was going to be problematic for several of our units, including things like Howling Banshees, Striking Scorpions, and other lightly armored, elf combat units, essentially. And units that really weren't that tough and had a very short range. And although I do still think Overwatch is going to be an issue for those units, obviously with Overwatch being able to be used in the movement phase in 10th edition, that can really kind of throw a wrench in a lot of our army's plans. But I do think there's a couple ways around it that can actually be very effective at mitigating its usefulness. So I was actually just hoping that I could take a quick moment to clarify a couple of things and talk a little bit about what I think Craftworld Eldar can do and other, lightly armored armies can do to mitigate the kinds of effects that Overwatch will have. And what better way to do this than with your standard scenario, right? Now, I think the standard scenario here is basically that you're going to be having a rather large unit, probably of Space Marines of some kind, either Primaris, Stern Guard, or whatever, led by a Primaris Lieutenant. So the Primaris Lieutenant basically turns every 6 to hit into an auto wound, which actually makes a unit of 10 Space Marines seem like a pretty scary prospect, right? 10 Space Marines are getting 20 shots. That's a lot of hits, and that could be potentially a lot of damage. So let's go ahead and do a quick rundown of the math, looking at 10 Space Marines with a Primaris Lieutenant attached, overwatching at a Howling Banshee squad. So even though it seems like a lot of attacks, on average, you're probably only going to get about 3 hits, which will auto wound because of the Lieutenant's ability. So they are going to be auto wounds, but you're only going to get about 3 of them for this Overwatch attack. And that's going to kill about 1 to 2 Howling Banshees. So it does depend on a lot of factors, right? If the Howling Banshees are getting the benefit of cover for some reason, like if they're in a piece of terrain, they're going to get a little bit of a better chance to save. Same goes for other squishy units as well at the end of your movement phase. And do keep in mind that Overwatch does not ignore terrain penalties. So if you move a unit into cover and it's getting the benefit of cover, you will get that benefit against Overwatch attacks because Overwatch is a shooting attack. So all in all, even if the Howling Banshees are outside of terrain, the Overwatch will kill about 1 to 2 Howling Banshees, which is not really the worst thing in the world if you really come down and think about it, right? If that unit was shooting at those Howling Banshees normally, the Howling Banshees would be wiped off the board, right? But 1 to 2 Howling Banshees, that's something we can live with. That's something we can get around. Even so, killing 1 to 2 Howling Banshees can cause your Howling Banshees to trade poorly when they do charge that unit. So is there a solution to this? Is there a way around Overwatch for combat units like Howling Banshees? Because as it stands now, it doesn't really seem like there's a good way to get around that Overwatch with a unit like Howling Banshees. Even if they deny Overwatch on charge, they're not going to be able to deny Overwatch in the movement phase. And also, believe it or not, I think Howling Banshees are actually going to lose their automatic denial of Overwatch on charge. I think they will still get the strikes first special rule. I think they're always going to strike first. But I think their Howling Banshee mask is going to be changed to cause battle shock. So a couple of subscribers that have commented on my last video kind of got me thinking about it. And the more I thought about it and the more reveals that I've seen from GW have me believing that battle shock is going to be one of those things that a lot of armies have a good amount of access to. And because of that, I think what better candidate than the Howling Banshee mask for causing battle shock tests, right? So I think the Banshee mask is just going to basically cause battle shock. I don't know if it's going to be automatic or not, or if it's just going to be a test. My suspicion is that it's just going to be a test. So I think we're actually going to have a much weaker Banshee mask overall, personally. So because of that, I really don't think we can rely on the Banshee mask to do a lot of the heavy lifting for the Howling Banshee unit. Having said that, Howling Banshees are still a very strong unit with a lot of damage potential, and even though combat seems to be less strong this edition, you will still need combat units here and there. So here are a couple of solutions that I have kind of come up with in an effort to mitigate the effects of Overwatch. So one of the main things that I found is that by basically just taking one extra Howling Banshee, you're essentially negating or offsetting the penalties of Overwatch. So instead of taking 5 Howling Banshees, if you take 6 Howling Banshees, it's essentially negating the negative effects of what you would normally get. Now, I know you have to spend more points on this, but I think that if you take one more Howling Banshee, and probably Howling Banshees are going to be about 20 points a model, if you think of it like an upgrade to your unit, you're not denying Overwatch, but if you think of it like a 20-point upgrade that just basically makes you a little bit more resistant to Overwatch, then that's a pretty good way to get around it, right? Now, the other thing is that in this edition, if we took an extra Howling Banshee, that would make the Howling Banshees more vulnerable to blast-type weapons. However, in this edition, with the new blast special rule, you're basically just getting 1 shot extra per 5 models in the unit. So having 6 models in the unit, 7 models in the unit is not going to affect the Howling Banshees any more than normal in regards to blast-type weapons. So if somebody decides to overwatch you with a blast weapon, you're not going to be any more vulnerable than you were as a 5-man unit. So that's also something to consider. Also, both Falcons and Wave Serpents can accommodate units of 6 and even give them a buff when they disembark. So disembarking out of a Falcon, you could do a unit of 6. You know, it does depend on what kind of buffs Warlocks and Farseers are going to get, but I kind of doubt you want to put a Farseer in a Banshee squad, because Banshees typically die when, you know, they charge in and they do their thing, and then they usually get shot to bits. You don't want your Farseer in there to be shot to bits with them. You probably don't want an expensive Warlock model also being shot to bits with them. Despite the buffs they can give the unit, it's probably just, again, not worth it. And you're better off going with just an additional Howling Banshee for some extra damage and a little bit of Overwatch cushion. And on top of that, we now know that disembarking from a Falcon allows the unit inside to reroll wounds against a target that the Falcon hit. So you hit that unit of 10 Primaris Space Marines or whatever with the Falcon, you follow up with the Howling Banshees, and now the Howling Banshees are rerolling all their wounds on their Shuriken pistols as well as their blades in close combat. So I did a little bit of math hammer with this with the new data sheets for Space Marines, the Intercessor units, with the Primaris Lieutenant. And basically what I did with Howling Banshees is I just got rid of one of their AP. So instead of AP -4, they were at AP -3. But I accounted for the fact that they were disembarking from a Falcon. And I was also accounting for the fact that there were 6 models in that unit. Now, I ran this several times just to get a feel for it. And each and every time, mostly, except this one time where I rolled really good on Overwatch, rolled like 10 6s out of 20. And then the Howling Banshee unit just basically evaporated. But unless that happens and you get really unlucky, your Howling Banshees should be able to kill that unit of 10 and trade up pretty much each and every time over 2 rounds of combat. Now, yes, that enemy unit could fall back, but again, Battle Shock does exist, right? That unit may not actually be able to fall back without taking casualties if it is Battle Shocked. And on top of that, 5 Howling Banshees reaching in there and basically making it to the enemy unit, being able to make their full amount of attacks, rerolling all their wounds, they're going to trade up into that unit, right? They're just going to basically always do that. And that's really good because as things are looking right now, Howling Banshees are only going to be slightly more expensive than Primaris Intercessors. I'm guessing Primaris Intercessors are going to be around 16, 17 points a model, which is pretty expensive. Howling Banshees are probably going to be around the same cost. So with the fact that you are also attacking a unit with a Primaris Lieutenant in it, that's a much more expensive unit than the Howling Banshees. So even though Overwatch could pose a little bit of an issue, I don't think it's something that's going to kill our faction or something that's going to make us a trash faction whatsoever. I don't think Eldar are going to be dead on arrival. We just have to wait until more of the data sheets come out, more of the special rules come out. But You know, based on some of the reveals that I saw today, covering Chaos Space Marines, I actually think that the Eldar will be okay. Usually, Chaos Space Marines kind of get the short end of the stick when it comes to, you know, special rules and other things like that. So it doesn't look like Chaos Space Marines are getting the short end of the stick this time around. And honestly, I don't think Eldar will either. I think we obviously will have to change our play styles and change what we're going to take and things like that. Adapt to new situations as they reveal themselves closer to 10th edition. All right, everybody, that is going to be the end of today's short video. Thanks for watching. I'm going to be doing a ultimate tier list later on this week, covering all of the Eldar units and basically where they're at the end of 9th edition. I think that would be a useful tool for you guys just to kind of have a brief overview of what we're looking at in our codex before 10th edition drops. And also, I think it would just be a little bit of fun to talk about all the Eldar units in the codex before the end of the edition. All right, everybody, once again, thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you to all my patrons, by the way, for helping support and make the channel better. If you do want to become a Patreon member or a YouTube channel member, I will leave the links in the description. And once again, thank you so much for all of your support. All right, everybody, see you guys later. Peace out and have some good games this weekend. See you guys in the next video.